of Kittens and Broken Things. Chapter 51. Kara numbly walked to the spectator gallery. Echoes of loneliness and helplessness set a tone of stark isolation. She'd hidden behind a rock as her parents fought to the death, and sanctuary was raised. She'd injected herself with everything available in her Omni tool as she watched Alchera spin in gyroscopic lazy spurts as the oxygen hose sprayed and then floated slack. It was a familiar and almost comforting place of inevitability. Moments of helplessness where her choices, which she hoarded so carefully, guarded with lies and guile and attempts at bravery, were wrested from her. Thane had asked her to forgive. She broke that request down into its basic components, running them through her head against the backdrop of the man and the proposed Manipar, and the fact that his choices had been wrested from him on the subject, surgically and cleanly, by her. She had likely removed the potential for trust as cleanly as lungs would be excised and replaced with something synthetic. He wanted to kill her, and he urged her to forgive because the man needed cover, and he was lying. Or he was trying a new way and letting her off the hook if disaster struck, but she was firmly and voluntarily on that hook. Thane did not forgive. Thane would not forgive this. Any of this. He would appear to, because he also hoarded and cultivated his choices. He would never give up being the man he was. Their lack of words was likely the most honest they'd been with each other, possibly ever. She observed quietly, her tone toward the fatalistic and absolute neatly detached from it, and unable to change her tendency toward it in moments of rolling dice, rolling lives. She watched the silent orchestration of several teams of people work on the two surgical tables, Sennar and Yased, newly named, a spectre, and a son who was a prodigy of Kara's manipulative mindset. They only breathed now with mechanical and synthetic assistance, bodies obscured by moving people and instrumentation. This procedure, even with this much assistance and standby, would still take 12 hours at the best case, much longer in worst case. She had not gotten where she'd gotten in life by expecting the best case. She had studied the procedure, could name all the equipment, could name all the surgeons and assistants, could quantify all the things and objects in the room, but the significance was crushing her. She sat straighter to hide the strain, although nobody was watching. Yet, Garrus would be by later. Garrus had said his congratulations and hopes to Sennar and Yased, and then had left Kara to her hand-holding silence. She hadn't told Garrus about Manipar, knew Sennar would not, and she considered Garrus to be the most understanding person she'd encountered since her parents. Kara's mind was a verse den of twists and turns and hidey holes, convoluted and tortuous, and Garrus didn't chase her through it, didn't demand she come out. He waited patiently at the den entrance, which for her was the exit. Sometimes not all that patiently, it was true. Reverie went a long way toward convincing her to exit. She smiled, closed her eyes, and the scene of the surgery faded for a moment, cold and sharp, deadly, replaced by warm blue and voice blur, Turian teasing about galaxy maps and tables. She knew why she didn't tell Garrus about Manipar. She was a person of 0.1% hope, but she saw the promise of Manipar as something that granted hope, but was ultimately empty. She was attracted to Thane and loved him in her way, but she was in love with Garrus in ways that couldn't be defined as anything but 100%. Nothing taken away. She wasn't afraid of making Garrus doubt her. He wouldn't doubt her. She wouldn't doubt him. Even Sennar did not wish to create doubt, only watched and waited and wished to create future hope. She was, fortunately or unfortunately, one of the previously dead. 2 years. 2 years of death, and no memory of anything taking place there. No heaven, no parents, nothing. Death meant that what awaited her was nothing. Looking into Sennar's eyes, she could not possibly deny that he saw shores and hope, and she couldn't crush that in the moment. Sennar wanted to die to begin again. In this act, her eyes opening again to take in the cold and harsh, she denied him the potential for Manipar by extending his life. She had taken his choice to end his life that had begun long before she had met him in Dante's towers. She had done the unforgivable, and he had urged her to forgive, mocking his own ability to do so because they both knew it to be so very unlikely. About as unlikely as meeting as Manipar. If she knew the man, and she did, as she knew herself, he would lie, he would hide, and his forgiveness would be a feint to guard the most vulnerable spots in himself, which at the moment might appear to be his lungs, but wasn't. She doubted he could forgive her for seeing every step he took to help her, and she could not take a step in his direction. It would never happen. He had missed his opportunity as a Manipar by years, by inclination, by the fact that Erica and Yased had occupied his time. He'd had 10 years of dedicated married life. He'd spent the rest of his time avenging her death and attempting to join her, fearful or guilty or defiant. He'd wanted to join her. Whatever powers Manipar had to find each other, they both clearly were very bad at it. She had been, and was, in love with Garrus. All of her attempts to hide it, hide from it, and deny it, had failed. She died, and during those 2 years had no visions of parents, or Turian, or Drell, no guidance, no revelations, chances, or answers. She'd returned to life, and to her Turian. Her fate had been sealed long before Garrus had kissed her. Regardless of him being in love with her, she'd been in love with him. Sennar had been, and was, in love with his wife. All of his attempts to hide it, hide from it, or deny it, had failed. But Erica was gone? If Kara was worthy of rebirth, why wasn't Erica? In her beauty, kindness, and joy? That was the essence of the question. Why was Kara worthy of life? She really didn't think she was. Or, as she'd said, Kara wasn't. Maybe Shepard was, and if Shepard wasn't, she'd better make herself worth it. Kindness wasn't really a marketable skill. Being able to kill things was. something both she and Sennar knew. Sennar had tried to reassure her she was worth those credits. Erica certainly was, but she wasn't as marketable. Kara sat in swirling recriminations, alternating that with counting her blessings until Garrus arrived. And then she didn't have to count. She was directly blessed. They were alone in the gallery. He lifted her into his lap and cradled her silently, one hand in her hair and another hand holding hers. She imagined being twins and gifting one of herself to Sennar. As much as that might seem noble, it felt like martyrdom while in Garrus's arms, securely and lovingly lit with the bright blue of his eyes. To deny any of her the right to be in Garrus's arms would be a crime. Garrus would end up with a very short and limited harem. Sennar would be, again, willing to dedicate everything he had and would get nothing back other than future risk and empty promise. Sennar, I do love you, but there's no way beyond rebirth, and I do not believe in rebirth. Garrus noticed her smile and closed eyes and asked,
Does that mean it's going well?
She didn't care about the surgery for a blissful, disconnected moment and said, out of context and truer than right now, it's going well. It did not go well. Her self-recriminations were halted by Garrus's presence, solid and reassuring, until medical reality asserted itself 8 hours in. The rhythm of the surgical suite interrupted by rushing and activation of ancillary teams that swarmed Yased's surgical table, obscuring any activity. She had been near drifting in drowsiness and comfort in Garrus's arms, taking in the scene with the hopes that it would continue on at its sedate pace. The slight, prickly cold of alarm that could be dismissed as her tendency toward thinking of the worst-case scenario passed, without diminishing, growing instead as Sennar's team continued with sedate choreography, and the table with Yased on it became more frantic. Tension grew in Garrus, and she cowered back against him as though retreating into her den. Cold and alarm grew to a ringing in her ears. Garrus's arms tightened, and that was a comfort, the restraint of stone or armor, as helplessness surged. She wasn't alone this time. He was here with her. He was watching it unfold, and they were both absolutely helpless. She couldn't wade in with a gun or give orders, instead cowering and biting the inside of her lip until it bled. She tightened her hand in Garrus's until it was numb. That was the extent of her exerting her will. Please keep working. Please don't stop. Please stay frantic. If it stops, it means he's dead. Please. From what she could see, the primary team still working on his lungs, chest open although tinted from her view. The new team was working on his leg, his thigh. Difficult to see other than what was moved off the field, sponges soaked with green, a ballet of emergency. He's losing blood. They have replacement blood. He's losing blood somewhere. They can't stop. She shuffled through all her medical knowledge and all her understanding of potential complication. Arterial rupture in the leg seemed most likely. She shut her eyes and recalled all the passages on the subject, imagining what would explain what was going on. She shifted her eyes back to Senar's table, sedate and streamlined. Chaos around Yosed's thigh, and it seems most likely. She said, it's most likely they have to remove Yosed's leg, or he's going to die on the table. She thought about clotting factors, that if there was a clot, they had to make the blood thinner, and thinner blood meant more bleeding, but higher clotting factor meant more clots and obstructions. It was one of the more insidious complications where the mechanics of the blood itself had to be adjusted chemically, balanced between clot and bleeding out. Unpredictable and with complications potentially affecting every system, with either limited blood supply or lowered or heightened blood pressure, oxygen deprivation to the brain, clot obstruction, or overthinning, meaning that the smallest of insults to the system resulted in unseen and potentially unstoppable bleed. The most insidious being something like what she thought was happening, a rupture, deep inside, doing its damage before blood pressure was noted to drop. Garrus said,
Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
he didn't disagree with her. He didn't try to tell her that her assessment was untrue. He must have done his own research. She had no more room for hope, willing the teams to succeed in what was closest to prayer for her. Please save him, please. She focused on asking for that over and over. She didn't continue the sentence to its logical conclusion of, because if you don't, I can never forgive myself. This was not about her. She wouldn't make it about her. It was about the young man she had convinced to get on that table and threaten his father into feeding his lung to a Varen. It seemed like he'd be able to feed his right leg to a Varen. Please, please, no. The surgery continued for hours for both of them, the horror crystallizing in a fan dance of revealed and concealed view. Senar was taken from the operating room for recovery, the clear floor around where he and his team had been still shining. The teams around Yosed were frantic, and the floor splattered with green, fallen sponges and towels periodically cleared away. Still frantic. So, he might live? Please? One of the nurses from Senar's team came to address them in the gallery, said that the procedure had gone very well, vital signs stable, and their patient was recuperating well. Both transferred and synthetic lungs were functional. Then they were informed that the main surgeons from Senar's team had transferred to working on Yosed, who had experienced clot and then rupture of vasculature in the right thigh. They had been unable to save the leg, removing it below the hip, emergency conditions dictating preserving his life over preserving his limb. With vascular instability, they were having difficulty with blood pressure and clotting factors. They needed to get that entirely under control before attempting to close. At the moment, his blood levels and medications were being adjusted moment to moment according to tests and results to make sure he did not throw a clot to his other leg, his heart, his brain, or his lungs. Garrett did not ask for odds. All the odds were bad.
Garrus watched in helpless horror, knowing that Yosed would lose his leg if not his life, feeling Kara disappear into him as though she wished to vanish. She said nothing, glassy and horrified eyes with a blank finality he'd never seen in her. She did not grieve, she did not cry, she did not rail against whatever fate awaited the boy on the table. She did not rail against whatever fate awaited her as she faced her grief, Senar's grief. Every fear she'd had over the last weeks of maneuvering this moment revealed itself to be true in her eyes, and he had no doubt she'd give both lungs and both legs to avoid being the cause. She passed directly into bleak acceptance, as though she skipped over grief like the space between valences of an electron in an atom, one state and then another state instantaneously. He was so accustomed to her as his defiant verse and stalwart Limayeth that he was shocked by circumstance and the look in her eyes. She seemed an entirely new woman, shrunken and still, no tears in her eyes, no sound from her ever-persuasive voice. He thought about Senar's expressed wish that if something went badly with Yesed, perhaps he shouldn't be woken. He imagined Kara insisting that it be her that woke him, insisting on being alone, insisted on telling Senar that his son had died after suffering the loss of his leg, and that she would hope to be the one that would die in that moment. Senar provoked to anguished and effective vengeance, no doubt managing it from a sickbed in brief moments. Kara would welcome it. This woman would welcome that strike and would make sure she was close enough to allow it. Garrus did not tighten his arms, but did set his jaw. He couldn't let her do that. He couldn't let her offer her own life in trade, knowing that's what she was giving when she broke the news. He had to pull her back from that. Wanting to close his eyes and pray to his own spirits, he instead spoke to her, tried to provoke her defiance. At him would be fine. Anything but this acceptance of the worst. Kara, whatever happens, you're not telling Senar alone. I won't let you. You can't give him the opportunity, and I can't let you. Every single one of us would regret it. I know you're big on martyrdom, but no.
I have to.
No. No more fatalities. He's lost his leg, but not his life. Kara, think. He can replace the leg. With the technology available, what we can provide him, his leg will be able to do anything he wants. We can buy him a leg that cooks him breakfast and serves as a toolkit.
I'd like to see a leg that cooked breakfast.
Pay attention, Kara. You are not going to provoke Senar into blaming and killing you, no matter what happens. I won't let you.
You can't stop me.
That same acceptance he couldn't stand. The hell I can't. You might hurt my feelings, but I think Russ would enjoy the opportunity to restrain you for once when you're being absolutely unreasonable. She still wasn't listening at all, her eyes unwavering from the surgical table. Senar asked me to kill him if something happened to Yesed. You can't actually stop me from doing that. I hold on to you. I call Russ. I transfer ownership of verse. He restrains you. I fulfill a dying wish. Problem solved. That got her attention. Her eyes snapped to his, and she said with cold defiance and suddenly directed at him, scary,
No, you won't.
She didn't explain how she had that much certainty, and he didn't want to test that, really. He preferred her like this, though the fear of what was happening on the surgical table was merged with a fear of what a verse could and would do. How about we try compromising? I don't kill Senar, and you don't provoke your own death. We do something else. Take this moment and redefine a relationship that's consisted of ambushes and outmaneuvering, and maybe try to work together.
This was my decision. My ambush and maneuver. It's up to me.
You're not only a you anymore, Kara. You're part of an us. I insist, as part of us, that you stay alive.
He won't kill me.
You could change that. You would change that. She didn't argue. More defiance in her unwillingness to back down from being the scariest thing in the room. Screw that. He was scary too. Kara, we're going to watch and wait. They're still working. I really don't care what your obligation is to them. You saved both of their lives. You're trying to save Senar's. The fact that he doesn't want you to save it didn't stop you from doing it. The fact that you are grieving and helpless doesn't stop that I want to save yours, and I will. Don't go there. I'm staying and you're staying, and that's true. Be pissed off, be defiant, be angry at me. I don't care. Do it from a position of continuing to breathe. The answer to every problem is not throwing your life at it, and I don't accept that math. Don't ask me to care more about your obligations than I do about you. It won't happen. This is tragic, and you're numb and reactive. We are both going to get through this and keep breathing. If you won't work with me, keep in mind that we're not on the Normandy. We're on Palaven. You never had any trouble throwing your authority around. Now I won't hesitate in enforcing my own. You said that here we'd be safe and have a family together. Those people are family, yes, but you are my bondmate. If Yased dies, you will not follow. I don't trust you right now. That's probably true for most moments because you like to lie and get your way. I like to tell the truth and get my way. Get used to it. I'm not leaving your side. You're unarmed, and if you get rowdy, Russ is real close. She was either lying or he really had gotten through to her. She didn't answer, but the cold defiance left her face. She began to cry, and he listened to her tearing sobs. She curled her body into his, more exhausted now than trying to cease to exist as she had been before. The cold dispelled, she was burning and wet, more complicated, weaker and stronger. He still didn't trust her to not be lying, but she was small and hand-to-hand wasn't her forte. She wasn't getting out of his sight, and she wasn't breaking any news to anybody about anything alone or in lethal range. They waited in whispering suspense, wondering at each change of surgical whim and necessity several more hours. There was a bizarre hope that they'd continue to work on him so it didn't mean he was dead, and stop working on him simultaneously so they'd have answers. Most of their answers from the monitoring equipment they could see, telltale beats of a heart and measurements of a respiration of a new lung. Yased continued to breathe, but they did not know if he had lost oxygen to the brain, what the complications were. Lungs no longer his biggest problem. It was Karen that came to speak to them after the hours-long crisis seemed to settle back into surgical ballet. Karen had the best poker face in the galaxy, calm and reassuring, and Garrus didn't trust that was true any more than he trusted Kara's easy weight against his chest. Karen said,
He is going to survive. He lost his right leg. His lungs functioned well after adjustment of blood clotting factors. I'm afraid there was nothing we could do ultimately in order to save the limb. In order to maintain blood pressure to his heart, brain and lungs, to prevent infarction of those systems, we in essence had to close the circuit, keep him from losing too much volume. He can be fitted with a prosthetic for the limb, and with therapy it should serve him well. He tolerated the donation and transplant of the new lung very well otherwise. The prognosis for survival beyond this point is very good. He should recover well, barring any further unforeseen complications.
Garrus waited for Kara to speak, gave her a few seconds, but when she didn't say anything, answered for them both. Thank you, Karen.
They will both be kept sedated for 48 hours.
So Garrus had 48 hours to try to get Kara to sleep and eat, and keep her from doing something stupid. He wished himself good luck with that. This time Kara did say,
Thank you, Karen.
No follow-up questions. Nothing else seemed to be of import except for surviving the next 48 hours, all four of them. Karen seemed to expect more questions, but when she got none, she did not ask if they had any. She smiled her reassuring poker face smile, rose and went to be useful.
You won't have to involve Russ.
I love you, Kara, and I don't trust you an inch in this situation. You're staying with me, and I won't ask you to promise because I won't believe your answer.
Yeah, that's fair.